Hello, my name's Kerry Lewis and I'm a member of the MrBruff.com writing team. Today I'm going to talk about how to spell verbs. Most verbs are doing words, but not all, and that's the subject of a different video. We're focusing on spelling today, and we'll begin by looking at how to spell words in the present tense. The simple present tense is used to talk about things that you regularly do. Most verbs in the simple present tense stay the same. For example, I eat healthily. You could say you eat, we eat, they eat. The only change we have is when you talk about he, she or it, which is the third person singular. Then you add an S to the verb. He eats healthily and she eats healthily. Sometimes we need to tweak the spelling though. So if a verb ends with an O, you add ES. For example, go becomes goes. For the next example, we just need to do some quick revision of vowels and consonants. A vowel is A, E, I, O, U, and the consonants are the other letters in the alphabet. If a verb ends with a consonant and a Y, you change the Y to an I before you add ES. For example, we've got a consonant R, then Y, the Y changes to an I, and then we have ES there. If a verb ends with X, ch, sh, s or x, then you add es. For example, fixes, bewitches, dashes, misses, buzzes. You need to have that es because you can't even pronounce those words, let alone spell them, unless you have that extra e. Next, we're going to look at the past tense. Now, the simple past tense is for events that have finished in the past. And most verbs follow the rules of adding ed to make the past tense. For example, walk becomes walked. Yesterday I walked the dog. But, again, we do have to tweak the spelling sometimes. So if a word ends with C, we have to add a K before we add ed. For example, panic becomes panicked. If a word is of one syllable and ends with consonant, vowel, consonant, you double the final consonant before you add ed. For example, stop. T is a consonant, O is a vowel, P is a consonant. You double that final consonant. And it's the same with longer words, but only if the stress is at the end of the words. For example, prefer. The stress is on the second part of the word, and we have a consonant, vowel, consonant, so you double the final consonant. Then, if you have a word which ends with an E already, you just keep that E and you only add D. So loved, freed and hoped. Next, if you have a word which ends with a vowel plus an L, you double the final L before you add ed. For example, travel becomes travelled. Now, if that looks a little bit unusual, it's because in American English they don't double the final L. Then, with a word which ends with a Y, the Y changes to an I before you add ed. So try, the Y changes to an I here, and then we have the ed. Now we use the ing form of the verb for an unfinished action. For example, I'm talking. It might also be an unfinished action in the past. For example, I was talking when the doorbell rang. The ing form of a verb is called the present participle. For most verbs, you simply add an ing to the end of the word. For example, eat becomes eating. The ape is eating a banana. But again, we need to have a look at some variations in the spelling. So, if a word ends with a C, you add a K before ing. For example, panic becomes panicking. If a word of one syllable ends with consonant, vowel, consonant, you double the final consonant before adding ing. For example, stop. Here we have consonant, vowel, consonant. Double that final consonant with stopping. Same rule applies again if you have a consonant, vowel, consonant in a longer word and the stress is at the end. For example, prefer. Again, you can hear that stress on the fur. Consonant, vowel, consonant, double that final consonant. Some people make the mistake of applying that rule for words where the stress is not at the end. If the stress is at the beginning, for example, enter, target, all you do is you add an ing at the end of the word. You don't do anything else to it. Next, if a word ends with a silent E, you just drop that E and add ing, for example, love and loving. And then finally, if a word ends with a vowel plus an L, you double that final L, for example, travel and travelling. Now, some verbs don't follow the rules. As we've seen, we add ed to a verb to make it the past tense, for example, rained, gained. And the verbs that don't do this are called irregular verbs. For example, I was, you were, we were, they were. We don't say I beginned, we say I began. So these are irregular verbs. If you begin a sentence with yesterday I, then you know that the verb that follows is the simple past. And let's look at some more irregular verbs. I bought, I brought. Now, some people confuse these two verbs. An easy way to remember is bring contains an R and brought contains an R as well. The past participle is used in two ways. Firstly, when you talk about things that you've done in your life. For example, I have visited many countries. And the second is to talk about something that you've just done. For example, I've finished. Most past participles end with an ed, but again there are exceptions and these are irregular. An easy way to remember what a past participle is to begin a sentence with I have. The verb that follows is then the past participle. For example, I have been to Spain, I have begun my homework, I have bought some books, I have brought a friend. If you'd like to do some more exercises and test yourself on these, there are some exercises and answers in Mr. Bruff's Guide to Grammar. What I'd like to do now is just zoom in on lie and lay, because this is a cause of common confusion. Lie has two meanings, and the first is to not tell the truth. In the present tense you would say he lies, so that's a normal regular word. It has an S on the end. Past tense, he lied. Present participle, he is lying. Notice how the I changes to a Y. Past participle, he has lied. Now, the other meaning of the verb to lie is to become horizontal, and it never has an object after it, so there's nothing to receive the action of the verb. You might say she lies down, she lay down, she is lying down, and she has lain down. So that's one that's to learn. Now, to lay means to put something down, and there's always an object, so there's always something that receives the action of the verb. So the chicken lays an egg. The egg is the object. He laid the tables. She is laying the rug on the floor. The carpet fitter has laid the carpet. And these are all irregular verbs which are commonly confused. Let's move on now to the final part of this PowerPoint, which is about British and American English spelling. With British English, if a verb ends with OUR, it's usually OR with American English. We say to practice with an S as a verb in British English, but in American English it's a C. As we know, we double that final L in travelled and travelling, but in American English there's one L. Generally speaking, if a verb ends in YSE, it's British English spelling, while if it ends with YZE, it's American English. However, in British English we can choose between IZE and ISE with a couple of verbs. We can say organise with an S or organise with a Z, and realise with an S and realise with a Z, while in American English it's with a Z only. The reason for this is because in 1425 the first example of organise with a Z was recorded in the Oxford English Dictionary, while realise with a Z appeared in 1611. These verbs with the ISE spelling were recorded more than 100 years later. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to buy a copy of Mr. Bruff's Guide to Grammar, I've put the link in the description below. In the meantime, please like, subscribe and share, and I'll see you in the next video.